Nachos, amigos, and welcome to Record Breakers, a music podcast where a group of friends gather together to share music with each other, an album at a time. It's like a little book club for music. We're all about opening our horizons and learning new things. I'm PD Rave, and here with me is my team, my squad, my crew, my gang. We've got David Majors, aka DJM.
Buenos tacos, muchachos. I will be standing by.
And we've got all the way at the end, Drew.
I'm not going to be standing. I've stood enough today, thanks. My circles are closed, and I don't want to stand by. I want to sit by.
Yes. We're here to talk about music like we do almost every week. And the provider of the album that we are going to be discussing, the one bringing it to our attention, is David. David, what have you brought forth for us?
PD Record Breakers listeners, we have recently been sort of in a early 2000s era. So I was leaning towards, did I want to do something more modern, or did I want to keep that theme going? And right on the last episode, right when PD was introducing me and getting ready to allow me to do my album pick, it was a last-minute decision. I decided to stay in this era. And I thought, it's been a long time since I've brought this band onto the Record Breakers podcast. In fact, my very first appearance on the Record Breakers podcast was when I brought this band in their 1999 album, Scenes from a Memory. So, after that album was the success that it was, what other option was there after your Scenes from New York World Tour? You go into the studio and you do something even bigger. This album for me might be my most formative music album. It's top 3 for sure. It is highly influential for me personally. From 2002, it is Long Island, New York's Dream Theater, and the album is 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence.
Drew, I mean, you've been here. You were barring a slight absence. You were here pretty much at the beginning, especially for Drew's first episode, for David's first episode. So you've experienced the multiple times that he's brought this great band. What were you I mean, we know what our expectations were. What were you anticipating? How excited were you to come into this album?
Dream Theater is always one of those things where I always enjoy my time. I just don't seek it out on my own for some reason. Probably because it's dense. And so I was excited to get into it. I know from just tangentially that this album is one of those albums that's very well liked within the community. I know it started some things that followed through on a couple of more albums, but I had never listened to it from front to back. So I was excited to sort of get that experience.
I was excited to get into this one. Being a, let's say, it's not that big of an album. It's only got 6 songs.
You can say it, Petey.
It's only got 6 songs. I mean,
it's fine. No, Petey, it's fine. It's fine.
It's
really,
one of them is kind of long. One of them is kind of long.
Petey, come on. Petey, don't do that to the Record Breakers listeners. Come on, Petey. Come on. As the Dream Theater fan here, I am bound by oath to be as much of a welcoming evangelist of the band as possible. So don't do that to the folks, Petey. You gotta keep it real.
I was excited to dive into a Olympic-sized swimming pool's worth of prog, and ready to just freaking do a gainer and a half backwards and forward. I don't know how to do. I don't know what diving terms are. Do like 30 flips and then go head first into the waters of these boys, of Mike Portnoy and Dave Petrucci and the boys. So let's just get into it, man. David, how would you describe this album musically?
Oh, what can I say about Dream Theater that I haven't already said? There may not be another musical group in existence that really hits all of my buttons and scratches all of the itches in my brain for musical composition. They are, as it is described on Spotify, they are the globally celebrated standard bearers for progressive metal in the 21st century. For the progressive metal genre, the best way to say it is that Dream Theater are the Enterprise of the Starfleet of progressive metal. Dream Theater are the Enterprise, the Starship Enterprise. This album, I think, shows everything that the band is capable of to their fullest extent. And like Scenes from a Memory before it, they had no record labels telling them what to do and what not to do. So they decided to be, and this might be my favorite thing about Dream Theater, they decided to be unapologetically themselves and just go all the way into leaning into everything that influences them, everything that makes their identity. The heavy metal, the progressive rock, the melodic pop rock, the instrumental technical brilliance. All of those things that you hear about Dream Theater, they are here in spades on this album. And the core of this album, because like Scenes from a Memory, it is a concept album, but in a very different way. This album and its 6 tracks, technically, the core of the album, if you can get it from the title, is mental struggle. There are 6 tracks, 6 characters in the main title track. This is, in fact, Dream Theater's 6th album, and it's called 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. But the core of it all is mental struggle. Everything from alcohol addiction to grief to faith to the advancement of science to postpartum depression to bipolar disorder. And just all sorts of things that really tell the idea of mental struggles and mental illness from a perspective that is neither glorifying nor demonizing. It tells these stories from a very clear and objective point of view, and I think the album as a whole comes with the message of these are the stories that lots of people in your lives are dealing with. So just make sure you remember that. Mm-hmm. And I think the soundtrack to all of this is a wild, wacky, brilliant, unapologetic, progressive metal super journey. It is a super roller coaster.
Mm-hmm. Drew, how would you describe this album musically?
Well, one thing I think this album does great, and what Dream Theater seems to do really great in general, is use of sonic space. It is something that I feel like sometimes can get lost, that silence from an instrument can be good. So that to me is great, and it's never such that it's boring. It's always interesting. The thing that I think is really great on here, and there are different like characters, and there's stories weaving in and out, but it very much feels like contains stories throughout that sort of build to a bigger, which I think is very, very smart. Because listening to a concept album that is one big picture can sometimes be a lot for a lot of people. I think this makes it a little bit more accessible. As much as accessible as an album with like 12-minute songs can be, right? It's always going to be a little hard for some people to understand, like, oh, wait, this has like a rise and a fall, and there's like different acts within this like same 12-minute song.
You know, the thing that I have grown to do, especially with this album and Dream Theater in general, is that I love seeing people react to Dream Theater. That has become my favorite thing as a Dream Theater fan. People who are not aware of who they are, just coming in and experiencing an album like this. And the things that you're saying are all things that I've observed and have thought about. I like seeing people's reactions to Dream Theater a lot.
The other thing too, before I let PD speak, is that this has a very like early aughts metal tone to me. There was a lot of overdrive in the like heavy metal scene, in my opinion, and the metal bits in this, I think, actually, what I at least think about in that scene is, oh, we can do like clean guitar and overdriven guitar, and we can mix those together with this very, I don't want to say like goth element, like that's not the right term, but there's this like brooding element to it that you get. Hell, there were parts that like, if there, I never got super into Tool, but there's a couple of moments on
definitely.
here. There's a couple of moments on here where I'm like, oh, this was in that era where Tool was doing weird shit, wasn't it? And
absolutely.
I looked it up.
Yeah.
Yep, I was absolutely correct.
The band themselves have said, yes, Tool absolutely was an influence on this album.
Yeah. Like, I never got super into it, but I get why people got into it. It was that like weird mathiness mixed with the industrial tone, and there were moments in here where I was like, okay, I can dig it in spurts, and this did it in spurts, and I liked it. So.
This is one of those times where I feel inadequate because I feel like I'm too stupid to give Dream Theater their proper like explanation and respect in like, you know, proper like music terms. But it is beautifully epic. The musically, has really great guitar tones, really great like drum work, really great like ambiance, and you know, filling your sound mind space with what they're doing and what they're telling and what they're crafting. It is you can definitely, and I would say you can, you know, they have it on the Wikipedia where they cite the influences, and they said that like they list, if you look at it on the Wikipedia, they list Master Puppets era Metallica, Radiohead's OK Cupid, not OK Cupid, OK Computer, things like Pantera, you know, Megadeth, you know, Tools, Anima, like Nine Inch Nails, Soundgarden, like all like things from that era and things from a little bit before, and you can see like a lot of those like touches in that music, but then that's all taken and put into that beautiful, ridiculous prog blender and spit out into this like the epic concept anthology series like album. This is like one of those anthology movies.
It's a jambalaya, Petey.
It's like it works really well, and of course we talk about like I made the joke earlier about this song. This only has 6 songs. It's just that the 6th song is 42 minutes long and is separated over 8 CD tracks.
It's 8 tracks, everybody. Calm down. They split it over 8 tracks. They're all
because
8
they are
specific tracks.
and because they split out the different movements of the song, of the piece, of the composition, and that's the big thing is like the idea of these are I mean, all music is some song is a composition, but like this is definitely with the idea of they're crafting a composition of music with their sounds and this like big, definitely in the classical sense. That's why the 6th song has 8 movements in very literal terms, and it is dense, it is deep, it is, you're diving into a whole like just like a Olympic pool full of jello and the jello is prog music, prog metal, and you're just gonna
come on in. It's fine.
you're just kind of you'll go in there and it's just like
Just let it wash over you. Let it wash
you'll
over you.
sink,
You'll sink in, but in a second you'll figure it out.
and then like you'll eat some of it because it's like blue raspberry flavored. What flavor jello would Dream Theater be? Blue raspberry?
Well, my personal favorite is lime, so I would assume that they would be lime.
That works. So lime jello, a nice swimming pool full of lime jello. I'm sure that Mike Strober, whatever his name is, what's that YouTube guy? I don't know.
And Petey, don't worry about this analogy because on several occasions, John Petrucci has described his guitar sound as chocolate cake.
Mm-hmm.
So don't worry about the food analogies.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to go where you got to go. Sometimes, I'm just going to have to say I'm fat, and sometimes food is what comes to mind.
Food analogies are totally acceptable.
But yeah, I think that's kind of where it goes, like musically, and that is what makes Dream Theater, and I love that it's unabashedly them because they got a chance to do this because Metropolis 2 Scenes from a Memory succeeded so well. They were like, the label was like, okay, fine, do what you want. Yeah, double album, sure. It's like okay. But yeah, let's get into those tracks. Let's get into those songs. David, what will be some of the let's not say tracks. What would be some of the key moments and the key pieces of this album?
Okay. The entirety of the first track, The Glass Prison. Everyone has that one song that completely changes everything they know about music. Everybody has that one song where it just feels like the entire universe just opened up. For young Deej in 2002, The Glass Prison was that song. Blind Faith has a great Hammond solo. And for the Mike Portnoy fans out there, I believe this is his best drum work on this song, Blind Faith. Let's see. The Great Debate is probably one of my favorite Dream Theater choruses. I think the chorus of The Great Debate is a great one. And I cannot stress enough the fact that in 2002, they wrote a song about embryonic stem cell research. They wrote that song.
Yes.
And from the title track, there's so much. I love About to Crash. I love War Inside My Head. I love Solitary Shell. I think the verses and the bridge in The Test That Stumped Them All, the way it goes from like Megadeth to Queen, and then back to Megadeth, and then back to Queen are very, very good. They squeeze a lot into that song. Same with War Inside My Head, that just goes full balls to the wall heavy metal. And I love that grand finale does not hold back. When it says it's the grand finale, musically, thematically, even lyrically, it ties it all together. And it really just, it all clicks. It really all clicks.
Drew, what would be some of the key moments or tracks for you?
Well, as labeled on Spotify, I'm actually gonna not do the thing I do because while Glass Prison super appreciate it, the story with it was really great. With the AA saga, is it saga? Is that what I read?
It is known as the 12-step saga.
Yes.
The 12-step saga.
For the listeners out there, Mike Portnoy, now reunited drummer of Dream Theater, wrote The Glass Prison as the first track of what would become the 12-step saga, which would be different songs over the next few Dream Theater albums, detailing his going through the 12-step program for AA and his struggles with alcohol addiction.
Yeah.
It's also
in the
known
liner
as,
notes. They're always. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that according to Wikipedia, it is also known as the AA suite, the Alcoholics Anonymous suite, or the 12-step suite. So both of you had it right too.
I remember reading that he dedicated all of those tracks to Bill W. and his friends, which I think is really, really sweet.
Yep.
I always like when people do that. But barring that, the first one that really like struck me that like, oh, I have to talk about this was Misunderstood. Misunderstood, great with that, like not knowing how to deal with your sense of self or what other people think of your personal sense of self, and all of that sort of wrapped up into one. I wasn't expecting politics on this record, and then the Great Debate came. And one...
Did you catch the left and the right? Did you catch that?
God damn it. I was going to say, the intro had a weird feel to it, which was cool. And it also is one of those songs that had that Tool-like bordering on industrial tone. And having a song that doesn't pick a side, and what I was going to say, sonically messes with the sides on the left right, I think was really, really cool. I personally am a stem cell supporter, but I get how they were playing like this is something that like we have to think about as a society at large. Like we should be having these discussions, and like this is not something that has a clear-cut answer. And I get that. I can understand that idea. Overture is a Final Fantasy song. I refuse to believe anything otherwise.
It absolutely is. The band will tell you that themselves.
And then About to Crash, towards the end, fucking the 80s like squealing guitar was fucking awesome. I love that shit. And it was all of the songs were great and fun to listen to. This was the first song, and it was near the end, but it was the first song that felt fun, if that makes sense. I can have fun listening to songs that aren't fun, but this song was fun for what it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, you guys pretty much touched on everything. I think the only thing I would pick out on is the one cool moment that I could like specifically zero in on, which is on Misunderstood, and it says it on Wikipedia that he John Petrucci wrote and played the guitar solo, then reversed it, and then learned how to play the reverse version. I even put in my I put in my notes under tracks that Misunderstood, drop it down, flip it, and reverse it.
Nice.
But yeah, and then like but everything you guys said as well about each of these moments. There's just so many moments to like for each track. and for the entirety of the second CD, for all it's worth, in this era. But the second half of the album that was the track in a very rushed way, so just like, here's just an album, and then here's just a song that's just this whole album. Like, and it works well, and I love the fact that the end is also ties into the next album, because like
and the beginning of the glass prison comes back from scenes from a memory.
Yeah, so it's like all chains together. Yeah. Let's bring it back around the horn and talk about some conclusive thoughts. Drew, what would be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
This is an album that, okay, for me it's a little weird, because usually when I think of like more progressive rock albums, I think of albums that you almost have to listen to as a whole to really understand where the album is going. This is one of those ones where doing that provides a lot. Don't get me wrong. The way each song melds into the next, the way it Canterbury Tales, the story bouncing around, all of that's great. But you can also, if you're unsure about this, I would say cherry pick like 2 songs from different points of the album if you've never listened to Dream Theater before. If, say, Glass Prison, Misunderstood, and Overture, if you don't get it, don't worry about it, I guess.
Bounce.
But,
it's fine.
But it's easy to cherry pick those and still get a good idea. Like I said, there's an overarching narrative, but it all felt like very well contained short stories inside of that larger narrative, which I appreciate.
Yeah, this, it's just it's all really nice depth and really nice musical interwoven intricacy. It is a fun album of crazy weird prog, and like you can get into just like getting into the weeds of some just classic prog metal. This is gonna get you as giddy as well David is right now, and maybe not, or maybe yeah, but this is a classic example of that, and it does it well. Like Drew said, like you can this is still I think it's still a great way to at least give somebody, I would still recommend this to anybody really, as at least a trial of like prog and Dream Theater in general, because you can like give somebody a couple tracks and say, hey, here, take 2 of these and call me in the morning. And see how you feel, and then if the symptoms work right, you might be in for a full dose. This is just a great album to kind of get lost in mentally, getting lost in sonically. To that point, I think I'm probably gonna literally just like, after doing a couple things on this computer, I'm just gonna lay down right over here in this bed and just with my headphones on and just press play again on this album and just keep listening and let it loop a time or two.
Now, see, in my case, I usually put this album on and I just like stand up and just go nuts through my apartment.
But but I'm gonna be in bed and my brain is gonna be going nuts like in somewhere else, like just like out of body. I will be doing that, but like in my own like dream space, if it were, in my own dream theater, as it were. And I think that's what's really great about this. It's just like it lets you get into lost into a sonic mental dreamscape that is really fun and really, I don't know, just this is the sound I want to do, like Yeah. I don't know. It's like all I can give you is sounds. But yeah, that's my conclusion. David, maybe you can have a more coherent thought than I have. How would you conclude on this album as a whole?
I will do what they did on Octavarium and say the story ends where it began. This was the very first album I'd ever heard to take a look at mental illness and internal struggles with an empathetic and non-judgmental view. And at the time I heard it, that was something I needed desperately, more than just the musicality and the composition. The concept and the stories on the album resonated with me so deeply. I think that the album does a really good job of depersonalizing the concepts, except for the glass prison, which everyone knows what it is when we're going into it. The album does a good job of having a concept while simultaneously having singular songs that have their own story to tell. It is not so deeply personal to where you're kind of uncomfortable watching it, like some really deeply personal albums can be. Another thing I love is that every single second on this album is completely with intent. Like PD said about Misunderstood, John Petrucci played the guitar solo, recorded it backwards, and then learned how to play it backwards. Everything Dream Theater does is with intent, and I love that. They do not fuck around. And more often than not, Dream Theater knows exactly what they're doing, why they're doing it, and the fact that they are able to convey it in their music. If you want heavy riffs, it's got it. If you want melodic ballads, it's got it. It's got crazy instrumental skill. It's got classic progressive rock if you want to throw back to the 70s. And all of it is done to convey a message. And the album is really summed up with The Great Debate in that it gives you all sides and all pictures of the spectrum, and it allows you to decide how you feel about it. For me, this is Dream Theater at peak efficiency. One thing that I've always loved about this band is that they are unapologetically themselves. Whatever you may have heard or not heard, whatever jokes or stereotypes, Dream Theater are exactly who you think they are. And that's my favorite thing about them. And it is all over this album. It is the most unapologetically Dream Theater album, maybe in their whole catalog. And I probably wouldn't recommend this as people's first Dream Theater album, but it was my first Dream Theater album, and they have been my favorite band ever since. So maybe you might want to check it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And those are our thoughts on Dream Theater's 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. Let's get down to the main event of the evening, the moment we've all been waiting for. Let's get down to the nitty gritty. Haiku numero uno for our Haiku Reviews. Drew, what is your haiku?
A worthy album. A band that deserves the time it takes to listen.
Yeah, and my haiku. Grandiose epic. Unfettered prog indulgence. No Kevin Bacon. No, actually. Dream Theater rules. That's my official one. And David, what is your haiku?
My haiku. Dynamic soundtrack to life's internal struggles with wacky prog stuff.
Yeah, those are our thoughts on Dream Theater's 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. You can, of course, find it on our Spotify playlists and our YouTube playlists.
And if you do listen, please tell me and let me know what you think.
Exactly. Check them out over there on Spotify. Our playlists are there. One, we have 2 playlists on Spotify, one with the episode slotted in and one without. YouTube, we have a YouTube playlist just with the episodes. And all throughout, all with all the YouTube music links, so you can follow along there. Yeah, you can check out all the album there. You could let me center myself. On those playlists, you can find next week's album, and it's going to be provided by Drew. Drew, what have you got for us next week?
This is a band that had some trials and tribulations for their first few albums, but around 2011 or around 2010, the lead singer that had left after the first album decided to make a comeback. They decided to bury the hatchet after some turmoil within the band and make another album. It seems like they might be at it again after about another 10-year break from albums, which is pretty typical for emo bands, I guess. But it's a band I've always liked. Further Seems Forever, their 2012 album, Penny Black.
All right, yeah, you go check that out. Be ready for next week. Check it out on our Spotify playlist and our YouTube playlist. Play Record Breakers, the home game. Do your due diligence and your due diligence. And of course, you can find us all over the internet. Recordbreakers.fun, rebelli.net for this and another show, Rebelli TV on YouTube and on Twitch. You can check the VODs on YouTube. Check us out. See us live on Twitch. For this and our other shows like Through the Tomes, our TTRPG Real Play show, our wrestling podcast slash millennial fun time podcast,
Disgruntled millennials.
GM mode playthrough called Fanny Pack Wrestling 2K23 My GM. We're getting into only a few more weeks of Fanny Pack Wrestling 2K23 My GM before we get into All In, the season finale. So stick tuned for the home stretch. See how things land and how things shake out, and how things shake out before we jump over to 2K24. Yeah. Like, share, subscribe, do all the calls to action, do all the things. Until next time, hasta los huevos.
Live long and prosper. And don't forget that other people are struggling too. That's the story.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.